And Emmanuel, can the U.S. and Russia advance a ceasefire in Syria with all the different factions there?
Well, not only the different factions, but also the different interests, even I would say the conflicting interests between the U.S. And Russia. They're not supporting the same forces on the ground. We remember that a few months ago there was an attempt of a ceasefire, but not all the factions were in fact invited to those negotiations. We know also that the U.S. has been supporting some of the rebels against Assad, and that Russia has been bombing mostly the forces, some of them that were supported by the U.S. So there are conflicting interests between the U.S. and Russia. There are many factions on the ground. Some of them are not part of the attempted ceasefire. And this is why no ceasefire has been able to hold for the past year or so. And so I don't see any factors changing on the ground, unfortunately. And this is why this tragedy is still unfolding in our region.
And do you believe foreign intervention can help perhaps prevent future attacks? The magnitude of the attacks in Syria are really unbelievable. The U.S. and Russia do have the Islamic State as a common enemy. Can this common enemy bring foreign interventions to advance a ceasefire?
Well, the Islamic State is more of an enemy for the West than for Russia. That's first of all. Second of all, the main countries bombing today the Islamic State, and when it comes to the United States, this bombing has been going on for 2 years, and more recently, of course, after the horrible terrorist attacks in France, the French army is also bombing, and the British. But as we know, those aerial bombings have not been able to put an end to the Islamic State. There are more and more people today in France following the terrorist attack there that are calling for a ground intervention. I do not see it happen, but as we know, unfortunately, aerial bombings have not been able so far to put an end to the threat of the Islamic State, unfortunately.
And we also know that if the Islamic State would hypothetically be defeated in Syria and Iraq, that would not have implications necessarily to Europe.
Well, you know, Iraq and Syria, with or without the Islamic State, have basically ceased to be existing countries. I mean, they're both failed states, they're falling apart, especially Syria is completely destroyed. Iraq is de facto a group of 3 states. So even if the Islamic State were to be defeated, those 2 countries will still be failed states. And when it comes to Syria, especially with the phenomenon of refugees trying to enter Europe, these problems will still have to be addressed, even in the case of a defeat of the Islamic State.
Absolutely. And we're going to move to Turkey, which is undergoing a major crackdown following the failed coup on July 15th.